Ready when you are. Take it away.
Okay, I'm going to time this with my...
Ooh la la.
Yeah. These serve a purpose.
That's the purpose.
That's right. Worth the price of admission then. Guys, welcome to another episode of Ben Clymer Presents. Today we are presenting the Lange episode. With me today we have the CEO of Lange Söhne, Wilhelm Schmid, a longtime friend of mine and a friend of the show. You haven't been on any of our publications or podcasts in quite some time, I think 5 years plus.
It's 5 years plus probably, yes.
And a lot has changed in 5 years.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
I mean, we changed permanently, but I think the last 5 years we probably changed even more than ever before.
Yeah, so I think for the newer listeners, of which there are many, a lot of people are still discovering Hodinkee and watches in general, maybe give a little bit of background on your tenure with the brand, and then also how things have changed during your reign.
Look, I arrived 2010 and I opened the second boutique in 2011 in Hong Kong.
Second boutique, period.
Right. So, and then we opened once in a while a boutique, but not many. In those days, it was predominantly press media. It was magazines, it was newspaper. It was not so much digital,
right?
Because we always think digital has been around for so long. Factually, back in 2011, 2012, the majority of the interviews I gave were with journalists that producing print magazines.
Right. And they would take 6 weeks to get to print or longer.
Remember, that's why we had the pre-SIHH. So we always launched the watch, let's say, in December, so that when the main event, which usually took place in January, came up, that you could occupy some space in magazines. I mean, that's all obsolete today, obviously.
Sure.
So a lot of things have changed, but then, came China and Hong Kong and our big development in Asia. So the brand became more global. I had done very strong years, but then eventually, and I think the Datograph Lumen, or the launch of the Datograph Lumen, was sort of the tipping point where we decided we need to understand who is buying our watches.
Mm-hmm. And so what does that mean exactly?
Our business model was from the beginning geared up to work through retail partners. So you sell the watch to a retailer who is then selling it to whoever he wants or will sell it to.
Right. And this is just for total clarification. This is multi-brand stores, traditional wholesale margin.
Absolutely. So it was successful business model, don't get me wrong, but we saw over time that, we lose one important fact. We didn't know who our customer is at the end, which for a brand that can only produce 5,500 watches a year, I think is very important. And on top of that, we believe that we're probably in a very unique position because we are a global brand. We have a proper backbone. We have a lot of people that work for us. And only 5,500 watches and probably less customers a year because most of our customers, they buy more than one watch. And we could never properly utilize that situation. Only as we changed to really get to know our customers, that's where we realized that's a game changer for us.
Right. And for additional context, so Lange makes around, we'll say, 5,000 watches per year.
Yes.
AP would be at 50, 60,000?
You would know better than I.
Something in that range, right? I would say 50,000. Patek would be north of that, I think, if you include all of the collections.
I think they said 70 the other day, but that changes. Be it 65 or 70, I don't know, but a lot more than us.
Many times with Lange. And Vacheron would also be in the, 30 to 50,000 range.
I wouldn't know, but everybody, it's in a way, it's very unique. From a lot of things we do, you would expect that from the independents. The finishing, the hand assembly, and even the movements are not designed to work with machines or with unskilled people.
Right.
Because, if you go through our process, it's the watchmaker that will set all the tolerances, make all the adjustments to make it perfect, and you just push the button on your chronograph, they always have that exact feeling. It's not too hard, it's not too soft. And they're all the same.
Right.
And this is down to the watchmaker. It's not that we could construct and then produce parts that when you assemble them, they will give you that feeling. That's really down to the watchmaker who will adjust it so that it really the typical Lange click on a chronograph.
Right. And I think, again, like the context that some of our viewers may have that and some may not, is that I think Lange historically, for as long as you've been around, has been this kind of almost jewel within the Richemont Group, at least from my perspective, which is that, Richemont is a giant publicly traded company that owns the likes of Cartier. I mean, just enormous, powerful brands. And Lange exists, as you said, as almost kind of an independent, I won't speak to corporate governance, but like from a brand perspective, exists as an independently run, independent style of business that is more akin to Max Busser and Company or a Crivia or something that is really making artisanal style watches. A, how does that happen within a company such as Richemont? And you can defer that question or not. And then B, how have things changed for you? Because Lange was always loved by people like me and Gisbert Brunner and Wei Ko and guys that are really part of this industry because we see it all. We know how dramatically different your manufacturing is versus your peers. But how has the embrace of the general public changed the brand and how you treat customers and how you view the world? So first things first, how does Lange exist within such a large company the way that it does?
Well, first of all, we have a privilege because we're not in Switzerland. We're in Germany, and there's no direct flight from Geneva to Dresden.
That's by design.
That's, I always ask when Johann Rupert asked me, said, please keep that.
Yeah.
No, it gives you a certain freedom because there's nobody that's looking over your shoulder all the time. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't matter whether you belong to a group or whether you're independent. You have to deliver. But what I appreciate is, things like IT structure, office buildings, logistic, very expensive small little parts that go around the world. All that is, with the big Richemont Group. And of course, they can afford experts in logistics, in IP, in security that we would be unable to afford as a company on its own. So, and I don't need to, it doesn't steal time off my calendar. So that's the great part of Richemont. So I think they give us the freedom, and I believe we fight for the freedom. But it's a very good environment for us to focus on what we're really good in, that is developing and manufacturing and selling our beautiful watches. I think at the moment, or for the last 3 to 5 years, something has happened that gives us now the recognition that we, in my humble opinion, always had deserved, but sometimes we were not given.
And what do you think it was that changed?
It is the direct to the customer. If all these stories are really being explained, being told, if you know who you deal with, and if you help that also to create an organization that is geared up to deal with these customers, that gives them momentum. And again, that's what I described, that unique position. We are big enough that we can afford it globally, but we're small enough so that we really get to know each and every customer by name. And every customer has an entrance into our community or into our company. I think that's a position you cannot generate if you produce 10, 15, 20,000 or above watches. You can only have that with a lower number. But if you produce a lot less, then you don't have the logistic, you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the organization to cater for it. That's why I believe we have a fairly unique position within the watch cosmos.
Yeah, and I would say, from my perspective, there are two kind of salient trends with Lange over the past, we'll say, 3 to 5 years. One of them I would say is very good. The other one I would say is open to interpretation. So the first is that secondary market price for Langes has exploded, some models now trade above retail. The standard kind of bread and butter stuff trades at about retail, which historically was not necessarily the case. And then the other side of it is the way that the retail experience has changed. And I think, this is something that I don't think you'd be surprised to learn, has been something that we've seen in the comments on our site a lot over the years, which is that with the change from wholesale network into owned retail, basically, that a lot of people are kind of forced to start over and say, well, I bought all these watches from, I'll say, Schrieven Company or Cellini or some of these great retailers that you guys have been with for many years. And then when you walk into Madison Avenue, you say, well, that purchase history doesn't apply here, potentially. I mean, how has the secondary market thing changed? And then also, how do you respond to people that say, hey, that doesn't make sense to me on the retail side?
It's I strongly believe the secondary market is just the result of what you do in the new watch market.
Right.
If you don't perform as a new watch, you don't perform in a secondary market, or much later.
Right.
Some of the really, really hard to get pieces today, there were no bestseller when they were new.
Right.
Like a yellow jacket, a datograph in yellow gold with a black dial. I think we produced very few because nobody wanted them.
Right.
Today they're very rare and everybody looks for.
Right.
But that's a different story.
Right.
But generally speaking, you don't have your new watch market under control. You will have the consequences almost immediately in the secondary market.
Right.
And because we have the first market under control, it does have that positive impact on the secondary market, which is great, even for all the customers that now blame us for doing what we are doing. Because if they have bought their watches, at least they know by now they haven't lost money. Factually, they probably gained money. Mm-hmm. Good news is most of our customers don't sell their watches.
Right.
So it's not their prime purchasing reason to buy a watch because I think it's going to gain in value.
Yeah.
But it's nice to know, isn't it? That just gives you a good feeling.
Yeah.
The challenge today is because there are so many watches that are in short supply and they go above retail, it also attracts people that are not passionate about what we do. They just see it as a profit opportunity.
Sure.
Now, every boutique and we as a company now have to identify the guy the lady is now coming looking for that watch. Is she passionate? Is that the beginning of a journey? Is that somebody that will keep the watch forever? Or is that exactly the opposite? Somebody that tries to take us for a ride, gets the watch tomorrow, and the next day we find it somewhere in the digital world. Now, how do you find out? And trust me, I could write a book about the stories that people come up with to get certain watches.
I'm sure.
But we have to treat everybody fair and equally. And even I know that if you don't get the watch, you don't feel treated fair and equally. But I can assure you, regardless where you go, you will have the same situation. So in this regard, it is fair and equal. And for the boutique people to decide, you have to start a relationship.
Right.
And unfortunately, the relationship doesn't start with an Odysseus and titanium.
Okay.
If you really want it, I understand that. It's a very, very admired watch, but that's for the people that we know and worked with for a long time and know that they're going to keep the watch. So that's the only answer. If somebody comes up with a better system that I can apply globally, that I can compliantly apply globally, where nobody in a boutique is able to make shortcuts and all that, I'm happy to listen.
Right.
We so far can just assure you it worked for our customers. We deal with those that are unhappy to the extent you can deal with them.
Right.
But we also have to accept that every massive change in a business model, you may lose some customers.
So you really view this as a change in a business model, the move from wholesale to retail.
It is. Because, if you look at the multi-franchise retailer, he will look at a customer from a different perspective.
Yeah.
He will sell watches to him, he will sell jewelry to his wife, he will sell the wedding gifts for the children. And so they see it differently. And if the one brand is over, they will move him to the next brand. It's a different way. And if the attachment is strong to the retailer, that's where we usually lose this customer. Because he was not really linked to the brand, he was linked to the wholesaler, to the retailer, which is a different story, regretfully. But there's nothing you can do. You cannot make an omelette without destroying a few eggs. And I don't like it, and I wish we couldn't. And we try hard to rectify the situation, but there's a limit to what we can do.
Yeah, and I think we've seen from brands such as Lange, but also AP, Patek, the good brands, like the brands that we all really admire, a massive shrinking in distribution points. Is that accurate for you guys as well?
Look, we went down. As I arrived, I think that the highest we ever had was about 260 point of sales.
For the world.
For the world. I always talk global, that makes it easier. I think we're going to finish the year by 58. Yeah.
So we'll say 25% of what you had before.
Yeah. They're all boutiques by now. And we want to shrink further down to the extent that if you enter a shop, they have at least some sort of representation of the watches there. And to do that, you cannot sort of have too many point of sales, because then you have a point of sale with 3 watches. I mean, you go there as a collector and you look at 3 watches and think, and all the rest. But we cannot maintain a stock level that would give you a good representation when you enter a shop when we have 100 point of sales. It's simply impossible, because then we would sell even less watches, because most of the watches would be on stock somewhere. Mm-hmm. So when we find that balance, so that we have enough point of sales to maintain a certain proximity to our customers, which I understand is a challenge.
A physical proximity.
I mean, we now have 8 point of sales in America. So from Southern America to Canada. And remember, in the old days, we had about 5 point of sales in New York alone. Now it's 1. So yes, so on the one hand, you want to create proximity. On the other hand, you want to have a good representation, which good people, which trained people, we are dedicated people, and they're there for a long time. That's the balance, Ben. That's where we made sometimes decisions that are not accepted by certain customers. I understand their reasons. I just hope that interviews like that help them to understand the reasoning from our perspective.
And so if I'm a new reader of Hodinkee or a new Lange fan, etc., I walk into the new store on Madison, which is beautiful, and say, hey, I've got, I'm a younger guy or gal, I've got a little bit of money in my pocket, and I want to buy a Lange 1 or an 1815, or, so I don't want to call them entry level for you. Are those watches available? Are they in the store for purchase?
We try hard to make them available. It doesn't work all the time, but actually that's why we shifted production. And for me, it's almost it's vital that if you enter an Lange und Söhne boutique, that at least you see a Lange 1, hopefully more than 1.
Right.
So that for me, I think it is important, because we don't live from waiting lists. We live from people get into the brand.
Right.
As I said, I can't promise that that's happening everywhere, every time, but we have a very clear idea to have certain watches available at every boutique. That's why we go further down.
Got it. So when you say available to see, do you mean to purchase?
Sometimes to purchase, always to see. That's the idea.
Okay.
If it's not available, it shouldn't be a waiting time of 3 years or something like that. So then it should be available within, let's say, 6 months.
For a normal kind of production piece. Got it.
Yes.
And then where does, we'll go to the iconic datograph, which you've got some anniversaries coming, and I would say the watch that really, in many ways, made your brand what it is. Where does that now, the platinum datograph, just the up-down, where does that exist? Is that an application piece?
Definitely.
It is.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, if you see at the secondary market, we tightened the market, and we say, who's buying that watch, and is that really a good customer? It's increasing in resale value. A datograph first generation today is twice the price it was 5 years ago.
I know.
A datograph up and down, close to retail.
Right.
If you get one good condition, box and papers, that's retail.
Right.
So that's the flip side of that coin. And let me also say one thing, because I'm reading these comments as well. Bundling. That's what they say, huh?
Yeah.
Which is stupid. If you don't have watches, why would we sell you something which is not available to make you buying something which is also not available? That doesn't make sense. But you have to start a history somewhere.
Right.
And if you buy a more, the Lange 1 is around now for 29 years. Next year, 24th of October, 30 years.
Right.
It's still our bestseller. It's a great watch that appreciated in value. It epitomizes everything we stand for. Why should I force somebody to buy that to get another watch? You know, that's just stupid unless we had excess stock, which you all know we don't have. So that's my answer to bundling. But, you know, you cannot start a relationship without some serious drive on both sides.
Right. And so explain that a little bit further. So if somebody wanted to buy a datograph, we'll say just a platinum up down, what would an ideal transaction history look like to get to that point?
I don't think there is an ideal transaction. You just have to buy a first watch, which is not a watch that, you know, we don't sell to a walk-in. And then you stay in contact. You build a relationship with somebody in the boutique, basically.
That's it.
And he or she will then say, look, I think that person is trustworthy, has applied for XY watch, and we think she's good or he's good.
Yeah.
And then we will allocate. We observe the market permanently. So if a watch is on the market, we will find out who sold it.
You will.
Who put it on the market, yes.
And I don't want you to reveal your secrets explicitly, but maybe I do a little bit. How do you know? I mean, if a watch is on Chrono24 or some dealer...
They're made by hand, Ben. There's no watch exactly like all the others.
Right. And so I guess a question that I've come up with, I've asked myself many times is, look, I mean, that nobody has endless money, or at least nobody in this room. I'll speak for myself anyway. If I say, hey, I want to sell my datograph, if I had one, because my kids have to go to college or something that makes a lot of sense.
And don't get me wrong. Yeah. If that happens after 5 years, we don't care.
It's 5 years.
Yeah, well, if it's 3 years, or if you are in a situation where you say, I mean, and again, that's why you build up a relationship with somebody. So if you are in an emergency situation, I would just recommend to call them, say, look, guys, I'm really in trouble. And we had a great collector in Hong Kong who was buying all our watches and then gave me a call and said, Wilhelm, that was when Hong Kong went down. I said, I need to sell basically everything to make my company surviving. And I said, who am I to...
Right.
You may remember there was a big auction in Hong Kong when a lot of great watches went. And he came back 2 years and said, my company is safe again. I have money again.
Yeah.
Can we restart? And I said, of course, you played it fair. That's absolutely okay.
Right.
But that's why you build a relationship. In this case, I had that relationship with the guy. But if you work in a boutique, you have a relationship with somebody there. And if you explain it, and don't get me wrong, your property, you can do with it whatever you want. You can sell it, you can gift it, whatever.
Right.
But if you want to maintain the relationship, it's a lot better than, you know, if you want to go back later on, that you maintain that.
So it really is about the transparency in the relationship.
I guess so, yes. What we don't want is, and with all due respect, we don't want people that buy a watch, a limited edition, because basically all the limited edition go over and above retail.
Right.
I don't want to give a limited edition to somebody who is 6 months down the road. And remember, when we start the distribution, it usually takes 3 years before we deliver the last piece, because it takes us 3 years to produce.
For a limited edition.
The watch you wear took us 3 years to produce.
Right.
To the last one. So now there's usually a lot more people that want it. We make then the decision who will get it. If then one of them just pulls out and gives it to the grey market, a lot of people that didn't get the watch in the first place will come to us and say, I mean, your system is not really great because I can see the watch in the grey market. I'm a great customer. I would have never sold it. Yeah. Why did you not allocate it to me in the first place? A lot of customers, good customers that couldn't get it in the first place, blame us and say, rightfully, you don't do your job properly.
Right. And what's your response to them?
I say we don't do the job properly, but there was no second chance for that. Very easy.
Yeah.
That's all I can say, because we didn't do the job properly. We didn't give it to the person that at least made the effort to wear it for a while and appreciate it. We gave it to somebody which just wanted to flip it for a profit.
Right. I mean, that must be a totally new part of the job, so to speak, over the past 5 years, we'll say.
Well, and it has to be a global job. I can't do that. It's everybody in the boutique. It's their responsibility to find it out.
Right. And I'm just curious how this works. So how, I mean, let's say it's one of these 1815 split in Honeygold, or the new Lumen Zeitwerk in Honeygold, which I think is probably one of the hotter models out there right now. I've seen a few on the market. Whose job is it internally to say, hey, that watch was allocated to Will Holloway, that guy's screwed, he'll never get another one?
Was it you, Will?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
No, very easy. First of all, even if we don't see it, our customer's going to see it.
No doubt.
That's a community, and they observe the market permanently, and they will usually report it immediately. So it's not even that we need to look at it permanently, which we do, but even if it slips through our radar, it won't slip through the radar of our customers.
And when you say reported, does that mean somebody texting it to somebody at the boutique or to you? Or
to the boutique and say, look, guys, that watch is in the shop.
Yeah.
And then, we will get photos, and the rest is history.
And then that person is...
Let me put it this way. The next limited edition will probably not go to that wrist.
Got it. And so in terms of all the limited editions that have come out over the past few years, I think you're right, probably starting with the Datograph Lumen. That to me was the first one that was really the world exploded. I think
all the we were always good with limited editions, even at auctions, from the early beginning throughout, there's hardly any limited edition that today you can get below retail. And most of them actually have appreciated a lot over the last 5 years, I think they got an additional boost. Mm-hmm. What was less usual is that normal standard watches did not depreciate. Yeah. And today they don't depreciate. So that for me is the real success. And that means we find the right customers, because otherwise all these watches would go back to gray market. Right. If the number outstrip demand, the market will react, prices will go down, right, and that will have an impact on it. So it's always the same vicious circle. Hmm. That's why I say the bundling, we can't see it because the number of watches in all these Chrono 24, that's going down, not up. Right. So if it's true what we sometimes get blamed for, a lot of these watches should show up in the gray market, and they don't. Right. So that means you're doing your job. Not me, but the organization and the rules that we apply and the compliance that we put behind it is pretty clear. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about product. Yes, please. Which is what we're here for. Yeah, watches. So the Odysseus Titanium. Yep. The 1815 split, which I'm a proud owner of. The Lumen Zeitwerk. Yeah. What is your favorite of all the limited editions? What is the one that you've gotten the most requests for? And what do you think will be the one that people look back on and say, that's kind of the classic of this era? Look, it's hard to beat the Lumen. Mm-hmm. It's only the Handwerkskunst probably can do that, and they are even rarer. Right. For me, more important is which normal watch leaves a stamp. And I think the Zeitwerk date will do that, because that's a watch which sort of hits a sweet spot. In what sense? A lot of people like me, they like to see on a watch proper time and a date. And that does it in a very, very nice way. I think the Odysseus chronograph for sure will leave a mark, because it's, like 1999 when we launched the Datograph. That's the first time that we launched an automatic chronograph movement, designed only to cater for the Odysseus chronograph. You can't use that movement in any other watch family. So that makes it quite exclusive and special. But, if you go through the number of watches, and sometimes even I get confused because I think, Jesus, we launched it this year, yes, and this year as well. Yeah. We've never, even through COVID times, we stopped our launch rhythm, which is very important for us because that keeps everybody within the company up on their heels. And I remember April 2020, where Tony came to me and said, we have a real problem because for the 24th of October, we wanted to come up with the 175th anniversary set. He said, we won't get a dial for the turbograph. because they shut down all the suppliers. And then 2 weeks later, he came with a big smile and said, we do it ourselves and we find a way to do it. And out came this beautiful dial, with 3-dimensional engraving, tremblage and all that. And we learned a new thing. So that for me is almost more important than launching a new watch, when we gained the competence for what reason soever that we never had before. The watch we launched today, the Zeitwerk Minute Repeater, how do you make it that the rhythm is the same, but if you put all 3 watches next to each other, the sound is different? Remember, Glashütte never had a strong history with minute repeater. Mm-hmm. That is something which we really developed from scratch and knew, where we could not rely on anything they did in pocket watches in the past.
Right. It's really a very Swiss complication, if I may say.
It is. Yeah. It is, absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about the minute repeater. So today, and this will air shortly thereafter, but today you guys released the Honeygold minute repeater in 30 pieces. And so what is it? You guys are using Honeygold a little bit more now, which is a favorite of mine. What does Honeygold mean to you? How do you choose where to use it? And then what's the point, so to speak, of the release today?
Yeah, we haven't used it a lot more because these are only 30 watches. There's a good reason for it. It's a great material because it's harder than normal gold. Unfortunately, it comes with the same disadvantage that you have with platinum watches. It eats tools because it's very hard to machine. And then on top of that, in the after-sales process, when you want the case refurbished by us, we do not polish. We first close all the dents and ditches, and then we just polish away what we put on too much of the material. That's already hard work with normal watches. With Honeygold, it has to be done in an oxygen-free atmosphere. Because of the material, it will react. So that's a lot harder, and that's the automatic restriction for us to only use it for limited editions. In this way, in what we launched today, Tony wanted to have it. Tony said, I want to hear how the sound is in Honeygold. That's how simple it is. Yeah. So that's why we said, okay, then let's do one in Honeygold. After the platinum is sold out, the white gold is sold out. Yeah. Now, also from a watchmaking capacity point of view, they are really difficult to assemble. A Zeitwerk already is not a watch. It's really for watchmaker. It's peak level. And if you now put one on top of it, which is the minute repeater, once they understand the movement, you want to keep them busy.
Right.
Otherwise they lose efficiency. And if we then give them to another watch and then we bring them back, that's a hard process.
Yeah. So the Zeitwerk, I think in many ways represents kind of Lange. I mean, it's like so resolutely you guys. Is there something that comes next with Zeitwerk, or are we pretty happy with the set of complications we have right now?
I'm pretty happy at the moment. Yeah. To share that with you. You have a certain capacity, and not only a total capacity, then you have a capacity in certain complexity. So you don't have a watchmaker that can work on all watches. You have a watchmaker that can work on certain watches. As I said, Zeitwerk is quite a beast. It's the same with chronograph and rattrapants in particular. And it takes time to build new talent into that. Right. Now with 5 watches in production, you bring the next one, but you can't supply the other ones. Right. So it doesn't make sense right now. And on top of that, with now the minute repeater, we launch basically a Zeitwerk, I would say every 18 months. So for the time being, that's we don't want to overcook the production.
Got it. And so next year is a big year.
Indeed it is.
And so how, I'm sure you can't give away any trade secrets just yet.
I will not.
So, I mean, how do you guys, again, I think, I know a lot of our readers and viewers know this, but like you guys are a very young brand. So how would one expect you guys to celebrate your 30th birthday?
The problem is to answer that question without taking away what we come up next year with is very difficult.
Understood.
It's a great advantage to be a young company.
Right.
Because it means there are plenty of uncharted territories. There's so much we can do. It's the time, it's the capacity in development that restricts us. It's not ideas that we have or executions that we have that restrict us. We have watches ready developed in a drawer because we don't have the capacity right now to produce them. And that means you have to be careful. We also don't want to over-celebrate anniversary because otherwise you become an anniversary brand. There was no anniversary this year and there's no anniversary after next year. So we always give it a breathing time to not overwhelm customers. But it's a challenge, how do you develop yourself without losing yourself? I think we saw a lot of brands recently, because market's getting tougher, they start to do a bit here and a bit there and a bit this and a bit that. Eventually you're going to lose yourself. So how do you stay innovative without losing yourself?
So no hints for next year then. Is that what you're trying to say?
No.
Yeah. Well, can we see something? Is next year, if you can share, more of a halo product year, like kind of a big bang, not an actual big bang?
Isn't that every year?
I suppose it is.
So I can always fairly say, without taking away anything, it'll be a halo year because that's every year. Look, I mean, that's why this year we said we only come with a Odysseus chronograph, right. No other watch, because what you put next to it will either be not recognized. Mm-hmm. Or you can't produce it anyhow. So that's more to determine. But trust me, rest assured, we do not go to Watches and Wonders with a mediocre watch.
Okay, understood. And then finally, if you could, obviously you're the CEO of a highly regarded brand. What other brand out there would you wear on the weekends? Or what other brand out there do you have a lot of respect for and why?
There's a lot of companies that I have a lot of respect for very different reasons. Yeah. And I'm a watch collector. If I can for a moment take off the CEO hat and just look at collecting watches, there are some great watches out there from the independent. There's no question. It's the one thing that immediately resonates with me, unfortunately. So there's some great watches. You just did a great interview with Mr. Arnaud and Rexy, and I think that's a great watchmaker, and I love the watches. Yeah. I love some Vacherons. I used to collect Jaeger LeCoultre. Mm-hmm. I still have quite a few of them in my safe. I admit I also have 2 Rolex.
Which ones?
It's a Milgauss with the orange lizard dial, because I thought it's so much not Rolex that I had to have it.
Sure.
And as they came out with the Deep Sea Dweller, 2,000 meters deep, I think never go that deep, but somehow I had to have the watch, and it's still in my safe. I like Audemars Piguet. I said it on stage, so I can repeat it here. I also have some of them. Yeah.
You famously in our little world shared a stage with Francois at our 10th anniversary. Yes. And in many ways, you guys and your brands could not be more different, and yet you guys are friends.
Yeah, look, it's because we respect each other, and I think there's a lot of respect what you did. Always loved the Royal Oak. Yeah. There are watches that I like and I don't like, and sometimes the same brand. So it's not. Usually, I would rather go to what I like on a watch and not on a brand, because I've never bought because of a brand. I always bought because I thought, like, that's a great design. That's something unique. That's something which suits me. That's why I bought it, irrespective of which brand it would carry.
And what watch are you wearing today, and what watch are you wearing the most these days?
I'm wearing the one that we launched about 6 weeks ago. At that Watches and Wonders in Shanghai. So it's the Lange One Perpetual Platinum with a black dial. Mm-hmm. It's a very nice watch because it just feels good. Has a solid. I like platinum, I have to say.
Sure, who doesn't?
I like weight around my wrist. Yeah. And that gives the weight. I like if I can read the date. That there's an advantage for me.
That one has the date plus.
Which date plus.
Yeah.
No, it's a lovely watch. Today, if I go to my house in South Africa, I usually have an Odysseus around my wrist.
In steel?
No, in white gold. I'm sorry, I'm not a steel person.
Yeah.
I love the white gold with a rubber strap. And I usually carry a leather strap as well because it's so easy and quick to change. And then you have two watches which do the job for me at least. And I personally like the white gold the most of all the iterations.
Even above the titanium?
Yes.
Which is like the watch, right? That's the hardest to get.
It's again, I'm not, the hardest to get is not the factor for me. I like, who am I?
Right.
And I'm actually the white gold gray dial, brown leather strap, or I even have a brown rubber strap. Tony gave that to me. I just love that combination.
Yeah. Cool. And last question, I would say, if there's a young viewer out there that wants to get into Lange, the best way is obviously going to boutique. What is the first watch you would recommend?
Depends a bit on the budget, quite frankly. There's Saxonia Thin. Still. Which, does everything Lange stands for. People don't understand it. It's the same quality. It's the same decoration. It's the double assembly. Whatever you know from us, which we do for the high complications, we do for that watch as well. 1815 up and down. It's a beautiful, watch that you can wear today, and you probably can wear it in 30 years. It will never go out of fashion. Probably it was never in fashion, which is great. And if you have the funds, go for a Lange 1. I think you can't go wrong on a Lange 1.
You heard it, guys. You can't go wrong with a Lange 1. Don't you forget it. Wilhelm, thank you, as always, for being here, and hope to see you again soon.
Hopefully, Ben.
That's right.
Hopefully. Thanks. Cheers.